Good morning, ECCLA. This is Rick Winter, and we have people still signing in. Thanks to Veronica, Sandra, Kristen, Danielle, Kristen again, a different Kristen, Greg, Carrie. And for those of you who did not sign in, I don't know if you noticed my typo on purpose. What I did is I said, we'll start at 9:30. Please sing your name, organization, email, and role. So if anybody would like to sing instead of type their name, organization, email, and role, please do so now. Darn, I was hoping I'd have a taker to sing your email, or that would be interesting. So today's call is, the topic is specifically funding streams. And what I would like you all to do is write down your comfort level with funding streams. So you could put high, low, never used, all that. So if you could put that in the chat window, or you can turn on your mic and let me know. I just want to get a general idea of where everybody's at with funding streams. Okay, Lisa, hi. Nicole, never used. Moderate, medium, 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 mid, medium. Okay, so we got a high, quite a few mediums, and one never used. For those of, I'm going to try to direct this to sort of the medium level. But certainly feel free to ask your questions. So hopefully you can see my screen. Today's topic is about funding streams. And yes, you just get money right out of the faucet, and this is over here is OEC. They just have a faucet to give us money. Actually, what we need to do is manage that money well. So that's part of what funding streams is about. So what we're going to do is we'll talk about where funding streams fit in Sugar, navigate to the related modules, do minimum input for required spending and coaching, using funding streams to manage a grant, setting up a funding stream, troubleshooting a funding stream, Q&A, and I need a volunteer for the parking lot. So do I have anybody that is good at Word and cutting and pasting? Essentially what you'll do is cut and paste questions from the chat box. Deb, you're perfect. Thank you for asking to record this. Would you mind, Deb, being the chat box attendant? Thank you. I'll tell you about your role when I want you to get started. Okay, but first, what I want to do is an RTT update. Essentially, we have been talking at ECCLA meeting. We had a special webinar talking about what's happening with the RTT. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm continuing to put updates in this support article I created for everybody. So if you go to, I got to bring the window over. Okay. So if you go to the support site, support.eccclacolorado.org, and click on Step 2, QI Applications, Funding Streams, and MOUs, And then all the way at the bottom, which is in this case on the next page.
So Rick, we can't see you doing this. We only see your PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's behind the door? Looks like my PowerPoint is frozen, even though another window. I am going to give somebody else the window for a second. And then Jose, could you go ahead and take the window, and then I'll put it back to me.
So Rick, you may know this, but yeah, okay, so we're seeing some things moving now.
Okay, okay, Jose, can you go back? Sorry for these technical difficulties. I'm working on it. Okay, I just have to move the screens around a little bit. So, here we are. Okay, so in order to get, I'm in the support site now. You go to step 2, QI applications, funding streams, and MOUs. And then all the way at the bottom, and in this case it's the last article, so we have to go to page 2 or the next. And then RTT, OEC, ECCLA webinar and documents. So this is the webinar we did on the 13th, and these are the notes in here. Sort of the important thing are at the bottom right now. So there are 4 support documents, and if you look at when I changed the date, so like example 9/21, this document has the questions and answers from the both the webinar as well as the ECCLA meeting. I'm still working on some of these, but the information is in here as of the 21st. Are there any questions on how to get to the help? Okay. Thank you for responding. I like that Nicole and Stacy said, nope, no questions. So, what I'm going to try to start to do, I know in trainings it's a little bit hard to stay focused if you have a burning question. So, oops, Rebecca does say, how do we know when the document has been updated? Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Okay, I'm going to go back. If you see on the screen on the bottom, I will put a date of when I update any of these documents if it's past the first date. On here, what I'll do is, see it says modified at the top on Wednesday, September 21st. So at the top of most articles, it will tell you if the article's been modified. So that's how you know.
So Rick, it's Rebecca. Other than going into this website frequently, is there any other, I mean, there's no way, there's no automatic notification that it's been updated. We need to just back and checking this, right?
I was looking on here. Since I'm an administrator, I wanted to see if you can choose this as a favorite. I don't see it right now. I'm going to go in here. Okay, I'm still on it. So if there's important updates, what I'll do is I will send, like once we get the budgets, that's a very important update that we're still working on. I will send an email or put it in the announcement section, sort of depending on how high a priority I feel it is. Does that sound okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We could make it an agenda item each week for things that have gotten changed.
Yes, definitely for Race to the Top, since that's such an important thing. Yes, that's my plan, is that as we make the changes, but if you want to, that's a great idea, Lisa, so I'll do that. But and somebody remind me too, just like Deb reminded me to record, that's a great reminder. Okay, so Deb, since you have volunteered, or I volunteered you to be the parking lot monitor, so that you make sure I'm recording, which you did that, and then whenever there's a question, once I get going, it's a little hard to watch all the windows. So if you copy and paste the questions into Word, and then if the answer is given, then go ahead and type the answer. This is going to be a really rough document, but interrupt me if you feel like the question is related to understanding what's going on, and then save questions for the end and you can send it to me. And go ahead and mark the questions we can't answer so I can send them on to Bill or Sharon or some of my other mentors. You understand that, Bev? I mean, Deb?
Yep, I got it.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your help.
Sure.
Okay, so next screen. What this is an overview of sort of how funding stream is related to the other modules in Sugar. So you can sort of picture funding stream is the top of the pyramid. Underneath funding streams are applications, and this would be, the funding stream is for the council, and in our example we have B-Test ECC is the name of the council for Bill Test Early Child Care Center, or Child Care Council. And then underneath it, the application is for a provider, so we'd have lots of applications. Underneath applications, you can have 3 different types of requisitions. So you can have the QI dollars requisition, internal coaching requisition, and external coaching. So you get those 3 types. Normally, I would say the majority of councils only have 2. They have the QI dollars and internal coaching, or QI dollars and external coaching. We are working on programmatically to do based on the council to automatically create the requisitions the right way. But right now, the program automatically creates RTT, QI dollars, and internal coaching to start with. And so there's some steps required to convert internal coaching to external coaching. And that would be the subject of a different call if you still need help on that. Okay, so underneath the QI dollars module is spending. So spending that's related to this requisition, and you can have many, many spending items related to one requisition. And again, remember that all applications are related to a provider. So this would be a specific bill. In this case is the Bill Child Care Center. So they have a requisition in QI dollars. Underneath, they could have multiple spending for that requisition. And like this would be, one could be to Lakeshore, another one could be to Kaplan, but all of them would tie to this requisition. And then underneath the spending are spending details. And so this would be like line items of maybe a playground set, some books, some manipulatives, things like that. So, and all those could be from Kaplan, let's say. So one spending detail that is, again, for Bill, and it is also going directly to one vendor. So that's the requisition. I'm sorry, the spending is, the requisition is for the provider, but the spending is for the provider and for the vendor. And then these are the details. For coaching, it's a little simpler, either for the internal coaching or external coaching, you have the coaching details. And do notice, some of you, when I show you these, FS stands for funding stream, and you'll see that in Sugar. AP is for application, RE is for requisition, SP is for spending, SD is for spending details, and CD is for coaching details. Are there any questions sort of on the overview of funding stream relationships? I'm going to go into Sugar after this, see, and then show you sort of how to navigate around. So if a couple of people could say it sounds okay, or if I need to explain anything in more detail. Makes sense? Thank you. I can count a, okay, no questions, good. Thank you. Okay. All right, this is a little bit complicated, but I'm going to show you conceptually, and then I'll show you actually within Sugar. Okay, so FS again is the funding stream, and once you go into the funding stream, you can go into applications and see all your applications that are related to the funding stream. You can click whichever application you want to go to. It could be here, here, here. And then you get into the application module. In the application module, it has a link back to the funding stream if you want to click and go back. It also has a link to the requisitions, and then it has a link to the provider site. So you could click on any one of these links. Here you would go to one of those requisitions, here you go to the provider site, and then again here you would go back to the funding stream. So let's say you clicked on this requisition, you get into the requisition module, and you could get all the way back to the funding stream, you could go back to the application, you could see the spending details for that requisition. So in this case, there are three spending, sorry, not spending details, but spending records for this requisition. So this could be from Kaplan, this could be for Lakeshore, this could be from maybe directly to the provider. So, and then you click on those and you'd see the spending record for this one, and then you'd see the spending details. Or you could go back to the account. So let me get into Sugar and sort of show you that.
While you're doing that, you do have a question about the funding streams. They do have more than one application, correct?
Yes. Yeah, you can have, however much money you have, you can have like 10 funding streams. Let's say you had $20,000 in your pot and you have $2,000 for each provider. You could have 10 applications. 10 applications, and the requisitions would include all that amount. But yeah, you could have 10 different providers for that one funding stream. Did that answer the question?
I think so, but it raised another one.
Oh, okay.
So the applications that are under the funding streams, are those only ones that have been accepted, or are those all of the applications that have all of the programs that have applied?
All those that have applied. So if they've applied on Colorado Shine, then click that button. Then it's automatically generated, and there'll be different status for, whether it's waiting for you to do something or it's ready to be spent. And we'll go over some of that. Okay, so to get to funding streams, if your menu already has funding streams, you can just click on the funding streams words or menu. If it's not there, then you can click on the More button and choose it on funding streams. So normally, for most councils, you'll only see a few, but since I see everybody's, then I'll see lots of funding streams. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in, for me, just the team is, and then B, test, because that's the test if you wanted to see these example funding streams. So in this case, this council, the test council, has the test for ITQA, for RTQI for 15-17. If you change the archive option up here, you'll see the new funding stream that will be coming out for 16-17. Right now, don't do anything with this. That's what we're working on behind the scenes with OEC. And then it has a school readiness funding stream. So you can tell the funding stream by the program abbreviation as well as the first characters of the name. So I'm going to go into ITQA, and you'll see the tabs across the top. I'm just going to show you how I sort of went back and forth between. And right now, under the program summary, you get general information about the program, but then you have these panels. And in this case, there's one application. So I can click, well, I can actually see at a glance that there were insufficient resources to approve, and there was an error. So you could see where the status is of all your applications just at a glance. So I'm going to go into that application name, and then you're on the AP up here, which is the application. And see over to the right, you can get back to the funding stream. So if I click on that, I'm back in the funding stream, the FS. So I'm going to go down again, go into the application. And we can also go, if we wanted to, look at the provider site. So there's a link on the left side at the top for the child care test site. So if I click there, you'll see AC, and I'm in the account. I could hit my back button if I want, and I would go back, but I also could go down in the account. I'm scrolling down. And under applications, you can see that this account has many different applications. The archived ones are old ones, or those that have been marked archived, and the other ones that aren't marked archived are sort of the current ones. So if I go into, in this case, I'm going to go into the bill RTTQI. And so I'm back in that application. So there are different ways of getting in, but when you're managing, it's sort of nice to be able to drill down this way. So in the application, if not all of your applications are showing, send us a ticket. It could be that it's archived if it was an old one, or it could be that there's an error. So sometimes your funding streams don't show. There could be a problem with the team. We've had that in a few cases too. So if you don't see all of your applications for a funding stream, send in a ticket and let us know. Okay. So at the bottom of the application, are the requisitions for this particular provider, so Bill's Child Care Test Site, for this funding stream. And you can see it's labeled Bill, which is the abbreviation for the provider, and then RTTQI 2017 for the funding stream. Okay, and if we wanted to go into each requisition, in this case we have 3 different ones. Most of you would only have 2, but we have a QI dollars, a internal coaching, and external coaching.
Sorry, I'm listening to my webinar. Oh, is that the sugar one they sent us?
Okay, so if I wanted to go into the requisitions, I would click on the link for the requisition, and now I'm back. I'm into the requisition, and down at the bottom of the requisition, you can see the spending details. In this case, there's a lot of canceled and rejected ones. There's a draft one, but you can sort of see the status of all of them together. And again, we could go either to details or to the spending. So if we wanted to go into the spending record, we click there and we'll go to the bottom to see the details. In this case, there's only one detail, but back up at the top, we can go again, you can go backwards again. So spending, you can go down to spending details or back up to the requisitions. Okay. Thank you for whoever muted themselves, and thank you, Deb, for reminding folks. Sherry, the archived applications may not be showing up. I think we've turned them off for in general, but they should be in the list. Sometimes you'll have a more. So I'm not sure what your permissions will show you. Does anybody else see archived requisitions when they're in their funding stream?
Hi, Rick. This is Bill. I have a little
Rebecca
on that one.
Yes. Okay. So 3 people do. So it may be just your specific issue, Sherry. So they should be in I'm going to go back to the funding stream. Okay. So I'm back in the funding stream record, and okay, in this case, there's only this application. I think it was the, I'm in Race to the Top, so I think it was like a different funding stream. I'll go back to ITQA. Well, I'm not sure where I was. Wonder if it was in here. Well, I'll look later. Okay, Bill is making a call that RTT 16 and RTT 17 aren't separate funding streams. Actually, okay, the name of the application was updated from RTT 16 to 17 when the end date was changed. So in this case, it's just these were sample records. You'll see a new funding stream though when we finish creating the GAE records. Okay, I just demonstrated the links. Okay, so the next part that I'm going to cover is sort of the minimum field for you to do work on the funding stream. One of the things that's been requested to really try to differentiate on the trainings is sort of what's minimally required versus what's best practice. And so I'm going to show you at this point what you have to put in for the funding stream in order to spend dollars in internal or external coaching. But then later I'll show you some more tips for best practice. So there are only 5 fields that are required in order for you to do actual spending and input coaching. Okay, otherwise you'll get, when you start trying to send MOUs, it will say insufficient resources or something like that. Specifically for Race to the Top right now, these internal controls are turned off, but they will be turned on as soon as we get the budgets verified. But in all the other funding streams, these are what's required or why your MOUs might not. Okay, so that's under the QI dollars tab, there are 2 fields, the other direct QI budget and participant budget. In the internal coaching tab, there is 1 field, projected internal coaching hours. And in the external coaching detail tab, there are 2 fields, projected external coaching and the external coaching rate. So I'll show you on the screen. Okay, so again, in the funding stream for all 3 of these, there's a tab for the dollars. You need the other direct QI budget and other dollars reserved for participants. On the internal coaching detail tab, you need the hours, and the external coaching detail tab, you need the hours and the external coaching rate. So I'm going to go in and show you these fields. They're on the 3 tabs: QI dollars detail, internal coaching detail, and external coaching detail. Okay, so I'm in a funding stream. Actually, let me go back to, so you again, in your funding streams, you can go back and forth by clicking on this funding stream. I'll go into the RTTQI. Okay, so in the QI dollars detail tab, it's these 2 fields. So $10,000 is in this first field, and then the second field is the $8,000. If I were to change this to $9,000, you can see that this 3rd field automatically changes, as well as the calculation for these 2. For the internal coaching detail, really all you need is the projected internal coaching hours. And then for the external coaching detail, you need both the hours. So if I put in 600 and the coaching rate of 50, you'll see that the external coaching budget changes to 30,000, which is 600 times 50. Most people will use the external coaching rate of 100, and so you'll see this automatically calculate to be this field times this field, or in this case, 600 times 100 is 60,000. Okay, are there any questions on sort of what the minimum fields are that you need to put in?
So this is Lisa, and this is kind of related to the confusion I had last Friday with all of this. So last year we really ignored our internal coaching hours because it wasn't directly tied to our budget, and we just provided the coaching that sites needed and didn't really track it as well as we probably could have or should have. So for this next year, because it is now tied to a budget, we really need to go in and make sure that we are assigning the appropriate number of coaching hours per the appropriate internal coaching rate.
Right.
At this point, and I don't know who does not have their phone on mute, but we can hear you. So at this point, for other councils, and Rick, maybe you're not the one to answer this, and maybe it's other councils, are we just going in and kind of estimating how many hours each site will get? I just worry that it's not going to accurately reflect our budget, or how are programs planning to do that if you did do it last year, or even if you didn't, so that it matches the budget accurately?
If we have time, I do notice that the time is flying by. So I'm only on slide 9 of 35, but at the end of the presentation, I did have a note in, I'll go to the this document, if I can get there, since I'm not in.
I think, Rick, it's less about how to do it in Sugar and more of how to calculate it.
Yeah,
versus
and
where to put it in. Okay.
I have a note at the bottom of this. So to estimate the hours for internal coaching, here's some text. So if you want to look at that, and if that's enough to make your estimate, so it sort of depends on what your, how many full-time equivalents you have. So this is your total hours, but for each individual site, as soon as a program applies, it creates the internal coaching requisition with the number of hours on that on each individual's, on each provider's requisition. Does that make sense?
I don't want to take more time, so I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the other fields, it will come after the more conceptual discussion of the funding stream. Okay, so again, this is sort of a, you can think of the funding stream as a bird's eye view of each of your grants. There are other analogies, would be a command center, control panel. I don't know, has anybody else used an analogy for what a funding stream is? No other analogies? Okay, so think of it as a bird's eye view of what you're doing for your grant. So those of you that are on, that have financial or program responsibilities, this is a good place for you to be in looking. It's less of the details and more of the overview of what's going on. So it shows you where you are at a glance. And for example, we'll look at a QI dollars tab. So here is an example. I took off the name. So in this, it says what the total direct QI budget is and how much is reserved directly for participants, and then how much is reserved for council use or discretionary that you can use to support maybe more funding for particular providers, that type of spending. Okay, if you look at the QI dollars to be assigned, if you look at right now, there's you have enough dollars, 2,660, to send out MOUs in that amount. So if you have, let's say, 2 that people have applied for $2,000 each, you would only be able to send out 1 more MOU, unless you were to get permission to change the amounts to maybe 1,300 each, which some people are doing with the OEC. Okay, if you look at the roll-up providers, so this is any provider that has applied, is if you look at the 7840 plus 2660, that will be the total of 10,500. So these two are essentially your dollars that aren't obligated yet, and this is your dollars that are obligated. Okay, but if you look down a little bit further, let's see, can I make it bigger? Okay. View. Okay, I'm going to do the slideshow, so I won't be able to see the questions. Okay. Okay, so again, what the QI dollars remaining to be assigned is what you have not assigned yet, and the roll-up provided a roll-up-approved provider QI dollars or what have been obligated. So these two together equal how much you've reserved for participants. If you wanted to, like in this case, let's say there were two to be for 1,500, you could change this, whoops, you could change this QI dollars reserved to, let's say you wanted to make it 12,000 and just leave 600 in discretionary, then you'd have enough money to give it. These numbers you can change as you like, but you want to make sure that you don't put more money in your budget that you that you can spend. But these are so easy, and that's one of the problems that you may have. If these numbers are wrong, then you won't be able to send MOUs, or you can send too many. Okay, down here in the participant QI requisitions, it shows you how much have been approved, but it also shows you how much have been utilized. So in this case, we only have about $2,000 utilized, and of those that are approved, there's almost $6,000 that that are still remaining for these providers to use. The challenge is, and as grant managers, you can say, okay, I need to get on these providers to start them spending money, so because we want to see this get to 0. And you can start individually calling them or telling them that they only have until the end of the month to spend, and then have them at the end of the month forfeit these funds so it goes back into your discretionary funds. Okay, so once you have this discretionary amount, you'll have this. This will be filled in, called pooled dollar requisition. So this is like a pot of money that you can use, and right now it has $2,100. Note, we haven't used any of this discretionary amount, and you can see that none has been used. So this is an at a glance for your spending, and you can for each of your funding streams where you are in spending. There's a similar screen for internal and external coaching. Any questions on this screen? Okay, Greg says, could you briefly elaborate on the system control for training? What?
You do have a question. If you could briefly elaborate on the system control pertaining to budget data entry. What are the system controls that prevent incorrect budget data entry?
Okay, in this case, if your you only have and this is for MOUs right now. There are other controls that are on the requisition. So the requisition themselves, if you have a limit of $2,000 and the user will try to do more than that requisition amount, then it will generate an email message and won't allow spending over that amount. So that's in the requisitions. But in this sort of grand view for funding streams, this doesn't allow you to send out more MOUs than you have dollars for. Does that answer your question, Greg? You're welcome. Okay. So also in your funding stream, you can see the applications and the participants. So if I were to go to the funding stream, you can see down here, again, here's the application and the participants. So you'd see a list of all your child care centers and home providers. So down here under this participant relationship. Okay, on the funding stream, let me you have these tabs, and I'm going to have to go fairly quick because we only have 15 minutes left. Program summary information, participant, application rubrics, participation, the budget summary, personnel detail, QA dollars detail, internal coaching detail, and external coaching detail. There's also an admin tab that you need to be aware of. Okay. If you were to set up your own funding stream, how many of you are on the call because you want to set up your own funding stream versus just understanding what funding streams are? No, you do not have to set up, Margaret, you don't have to set up your own funding streams. It's totally optional. Sugar is built, to handle the funding streams that are required by the state, like school readiness, race to the top, CCAP, and ITQA. But you could, and actually for future use, you could let's say you have another grant that you want to have more details for for your grantor, so they may like the information that you provide. Okay, so we have one that says they would like to, and one we say that we do not want to learn about it. So could I get some more, because we could have some more questions. If I do a brief overview, then you can sort of decide if you want to do it. Okay, so we got, again, now we have 2 and 2 that will say yes, but Stacy says she can work directly. I know that there were a few people on the last call that wanted to do this. So again, we're now about half and half, 3 and 3. To do this. So if you want, so that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the call is, but it's only about 13 minutes, so I don't know if I'll get all the way through, but I'll do a quick overview for those of you that want to stay on the call. And if you have any questions and want to get off the call, that go ahead and send. You can put the question in the chat box so Deb can capture it for me, or you can send a ticket to support@ECCLAcolorado.org. Okay, so I'm going to give you, partially by going through creating a funding stream, you'll get an idea. Okay, so there's a few things that you should, yes, Teresa, I will send out the PowerPoint. What I'll do is we'll attach it to the bottom of whatever support article I put this in. So it's probably going to be the bottom of the Friday support calls. So if you want to get off and then see the overview just by looking at the PowerPoint, you can, and then you could ask questions. Okay, so when you're naming a funding stream, don't use one of the abbreviations, the common ones, of a funding stream that's already there. So both in the naming and in the abbreviation, do not use RTT, SR, CCAP, or ITQA because of reports and things like that. So those are reserved, for the OEC funding streams. What will show you in the name, it actually will show you the program abbreviation. So one of these, or what you put in, the council abbreviation, the start date, and the end date. You need to remember to make it big again. Okay, I'm going to show you as much as we have time for. Not all the fields that are required. Some are for good practice. You can choose whether or not you have applications. And that's a fairly important decision when you have applications. It organizes requisitions for you, but they aren't required. And the last funding we created for a different council did not require the application. And it's a little quicker. If you do want the applications, you probably should go through EchoSign, and it does take longer. to get those documents in. And you can decide, if you do have the application, you can put them on ECCLA. So in addition to these 4, your providers will see your specific funding stream. So for example, Denver will see the DPP on ECCLA, and their participants can apply just like they do for the others.
Hey, Rick, I have...
Bill is saying you can't post them on ECCLA. They're there that are set up with custom code. So, so we would have to do that. You know, you'd have to. That would sort of be extra that we'd have to do through Bill's help. Thanks, Bill, for that clarification. Somebody else had a question?
It's Lisa, Rick. In terms of the ones that I have personally set up for our agency's use, I don't need MOUs and I don't do individual requisitions with it. One, they don't have QI dollars, and I'm really trying to track the coaching effort related to that work. But I would really prefer to be able to leave it as the pooled requisition and just build to that pooled requisition. But as of yesterday, every time that's happening, I'm getting you know, messages from Sugar that the actions are failing.
I know Bill's on the call. Bill, do you want to unmute your microphone, and why that might? Can you? So what I'm hearing you're saying, Lisa, is that can you attach spending directly to the pooled requisition?
It's coaching details in this case.
Oh, okay. So is it coaching details directly to the pooled coaching detail requisition? Well, it should be. So
I have always been able to in the past until yesterday.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yesterday I'm getting a bunch of error messages every time they do a coaching detail to a pooled requisition. Okay, so we'll actually Bill's on the call and he knows about it. Did you send a ticket in? I didn't, because I was busy doing other things. I can today if you like. If you send it in to remind us, I'll look at it, or and if I can't solve it, Bill will look at it. Okay.
And Lisa, just to answer your question, yes, you absolutely can do what you're asking about. There seems to be some new issue with that workflow that you were asking about, and I'll be looking into that today and hopefully finding a resolution to that. But yes, you can associate coaching with the pooled requisition, but obviously you lose a lot of reporting with that because generally speaking, people want to be able to track down like who was spending, who received what coaching, and you lose that when you just use the pooled requisition.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably something I'd like to, eventually talk through, because that is the unfortunate part. And
to that effect, I would just recommend creating individual provider requisitions, and you don't have to create dollar ones if you don't need them. I would just create, provider internal requisitions, and then providers can use those, and you can track them and have that insight into who's using what.
It just feels like a lot of unnecessary work, but if that's the only option.
It's not. Again, you can use a pooled requisition, you just lose out on reporting.
Totally up to you, Lisa.
Yep.
Okay, so to start your funding stream, gather all the information you need, the name, budget, why you're having it. Sugar, choose funding streams, and create funding streams. So on the arrow after funding streams, you click create funding streams. Okay, and while you're in here, if you notice and this is true for all forms, some of the fields have help. So here it says the program name, but enter a full program name. So I'm going to say the Great Equalizer is the name of the program, and because it's supposed to make everybody able to go to child care if they want to, no matter how much money they make. And the name of the funding, the abbreviation will be TGE. So in some cases you won't see the help, and in some cases you will. If for some reason you don't know what a field is and you think we should add help underneath the fields, feel free to send us a support ticket. Okay, and you'll see in this case, see where it says required and required domains. If I were to try to save this, this wouldn't work, and I'd get these little red exclamation points, an error message, and so it's telling you lots of things. You've got to do more work than just that one field. Okay, so in the functional areas, if you click here, you can see all the choices, and the reason why that there's no help is that it seems like that it would be explanatory, but again, if you think people would need help, you know, just send us a ticket and we'll add those description. Okay, so we're going to say that this is for quality improvement. And if you notice in this case, it has this black with an X. That means you can do more than one. So if I wanted to do quality improvement and systems building for this functional area, I could. Okay, under domains, I'll put early learning. Start date, you have the calendar option. So let's say it started on September 1st, and it's going to end, I'll click the arrows to June 30th. Okay, the others aren't really required. Like here, you'll see in your current ones, you'll see the Colorado Department of Human Services. And if you want their logo so that they can see that on the portal. And then down here, the program officer is like who at your, the grantor so this would be whoever is responsible that's giving you the money, but your grant lead would be whoever's setting up the funding stream for your council. So I'm going to put my name here. I type it and see I have my name as a test, but I'm going to go ahead and put me in. And Stacy asked, are there a way to see things that are required? Yeah, one of the ways that I did that, Stacy, was just hit save, and you see whatever is in red will be required after you do one field. That is an easy way to see what's required. Program officer is not required in order, you know, to put this in. It depends on what you're doing with this. This will allow you to know who to contact at, let's say if it was CDHS, who to contact at CDHS for questions on that. So it's a good practice to put it in, but it's not required for your work. Okay, I'm going to show you one thing that often happens. See, you can't put in the grant lead email over here. There's this little red, it's a calculated field. So if I hit save, again, I'm going to have these, it's going back to the second tab, application setup, that I have these three fields are required, Stacy. So I'm going to go ahead and put right now that there are no MOU signers. I'm going to do does not sign, and does not sign for the council, participant, and the funder. And then I hit save, and that still has that message, but you can see I have success. So those were the required fields. But again, good practice has you filling in a lot more of these fields. I'm back in here, and it would, you know, it makes sense to have the QI dollars if you're using dollars for this, but like if you're Lisa and only using internal or external coaching. Okay, so I knew we wouldn't get very far in this, so I will, it is, suggesting putting an asterisk. I was hoping we could make them in color, but I'm looking at different options for what's required. And right now we have the word required, in the field, as well as it turns red afterwards. But that's something that the Sugar Advisory Group, which we aren't meeting tomorrow, today after this call, but I'll send out the next schedule when we do have it. So I apologize that the time is up, but again, I will put this PowerPoint on. Yeah, if you attempt to save it as soon as you start creating it, it will hide all the required fields in red. Yeah, so Bill is reinforcing that when we hit that save, we got all those fields in red. Okay, so what we did cover is how do funding streams fit in Sugar, how to navigate back and forth to the modules, the minimum input you needed, and then an overview of funding streams to manage your grants, and we started with setting up a funding stream. I'm sorry I didn't have more time for you all, but please put any comments in the comment section, and let me know if this is helpful or not, or what we should do next on to continue this, maybe funding streams part 2. And remember next week that we have reconciliation. Thank you all for attending. And Deb, if you could email me the document if you have one. I really appreciate everybody being on the call, and have a great week. You're welcome. Thank you all for saying thanks. Happy Friday to you all.